you very much, Professor Angela, for these brilliant words and for your opening. Before we move to the first plenary, I would like to say a few words about the background of organizing this. So Angela just told her point of view. I wasn't aware of this, but it's thank you for letting me know, and thank you for all the trust that you had in the first conference, and now here at the Federal University of São Paulo. Thank you, Professor Esper, for his trust and support on organizing this conference. And I would like to say a few words about the importance of hosting this event. I really hope to be brief. So as many of you know, this is the second edition of the event. The first one was in 2016. And it was kind of a workshop we organized. At that time we received 15 proposals, and we managed also to get some funding for the event. And we could invite some speakers from abroad that also came to this edition. I believe that they liked either the conference or being here in Brazil and São Paulo. In this year, we had just attended an important session of panels that took place in Milan for the ICPP conference, and these panels were organized by Leslie Paul and Magdalena Hadziski, and this was very important to start to consolidate this network. So we met there in Milan in 2015. I had also some connections, and then in 2016 we came here in São Paulo to organize a first edition of the conference. At that time we had around 50 participants circulating in 3 days at the Brazilian Center for Analysis and Planning, with a very cozy and intellectually stimulating environment. And we definitely moved on about how we were thinking on policy diffusion. And this was so great and so interesting for us here in São Paulo and for the field in general, that I thought that it was necessary to organize a second edition of the conference to keep this network alive and boost up knowledge production on policy diffusion. And this process kind of started last year in 2017 in Cambridge, where I was attending a workshop with a group of colleagues from the Institute of Development Studies, in particular the Brazil group led by my friend and colleague Alex Shankland, who's here. And I started talking to colleagues, hey, I'm thinking about doing this again in São Paulo. And people were so enthusiastic that I said, okay, we must do this. And an important person at that point was Roberta Sakai, that you probably received many emails from her, and you probably met her at the registration. So we were there, and I asked her if she wanted to join me on this project and collaborate on the organization. And she said, okay, it's a great idea, and the journey started. It was more kind of a labyrinth than a journey, because we knew where we had started, but we didn't know where we were, what kind of challenges we were going to face along this process. The conference grew exponentially. I mobilized my networks. I advertised at the conference in Singapore at the ICPP conference, where there were panels on policy diffusion being organized by Chris Walker and Leslie Paul. And as a sort of result of this task force, we received at this time around 130 proposals, so more than 15 in 2016. And we have now around 250 registered participants that will be circulating on these 4 days of the conference. And I'm so happy that this happened. And one of the first things that I thought it was important to do on this new version of the conference, it was to move a little bit beyond the idea of policy diffusion and bring together policy diffusion and development cooperation. So this is something that became evident at the first conference, because these two areas of research have so much in common. Scholars are working with similar topics, dealing with similar processes, actors and dynamics, but they don't talk to each other very often. And we understood that fabricating this conversation was not only necessary to expand our field of research, but would open new possibilities of knowledge exchange, production and collaboration. And I believe that this was somehow the sort of what physicists talk as the quantum leap, to move from 15 proposals to 130 proposals. This was sort of this quantum leap for the conference, that in Brazil we use another expression which is much more fun. We talk about the cat leap, o pulo do gato. This was the cat leap of the conference to make this such a large and important event. And it's really important to do this in Brazil, and to have started this from Brazil, both from theoretical reasons as well as from empirical reasons. Because, first of all, we don't have so many conferences as this with a lot of participants, important speakers, and very focused on one specific topic. So we cannot compare São Paulo to the vibrant and energetic intellectual environment that we have in Paris, London, and New York. So it's really important to produce this here. And also the empirical reason regards a sort of changing nature and direction of dynamics of policy diffusion and development cooperation on the global arena. So on the one hand, policy transfers historically took shape from northern states towards southern countries, and development cooperation was basically led by United States and Europe. And of course, this is a very simple caricature of the field. It's much more complex than that. But we will have time to discuss about it. But at a certain point, it became evident that in the past years there was a sort of central role being played by rising powers, by southern countries, and Brazil and other emerging countries who had an important place on this process. The movement of South-South cooperation was gaining force, with projects being organized between Latin American countries, between Latin American and Sub-Saharan African countries, and also in the field of discourse. This narrative about development cooperation was changing, with southern actors claiming for a different way of doing cooperation against different traditional practices. And in the case of Brazil in particular, it was quite clear that policy transfer was intimately intertwined with development cooperation. And this is because Brazil has been a sort of laboratory of public policies, producing since the 90s important policy innovations. Insofar as Brazil had to face from the 90s on different situations of poverty and social vulnerability, and produce public policies in circumstances of lack of resources, low state capacity, and high levels of bureaucracy. And this assisted us to produce very interesting policy models, which we can find examples as the participatory budgeting in Porto Alegre, as well as the Bolsa Família program, a conditional cash transfer program, and the National School Feeding program, which have been spreading worldwide. And And for certain institutions and politicians, these policies were considered to be more appropriated to be adopted in similar countries and improve the quality of social life in the South, rather than importing policies that were being implemented in northern countries. So in the past years, it was easy to observe different groups of public policy ambassadors advocating and defending these Brazilian models and other southern models, as well as Brazilian public servants involved in technical assistance to other southern states. More than that, Brazil became somehow a place for public policy pilgrimage for developing countries, but also for northern countries to learn about these policies. The Ministry of Social Development, for example, received hundreds of delegations of public servants or national authorities, governmental authorities, to learn about these policies from all over the world in the past years. And the same happened to the experience of Porto Alegre, participatory budgeting. So Porto Alegre became also a place for pilgrimage of people interested on social citizen participation all over the world. And similar situations were also perceived in other southern emerging countries. Of course, this is part of a bigger template where we have a sort of changing nature of policy diffusion and development cooperation dynamics, which we could in short state that we have now a sort of process of tropicalization of global public policies in the international arena. And this is from the empirical point of view. From the heuristical point of view, knowledge production on policy transfer and development cooperation, I believe that it needs to be revisited with fresh eyes to understand this new and emerging dynamics. And for this, I mean that it's not only important to capture these new directions of policy transfer and this tropicalizing movement, but also to innovate on theory building and conceptualization, including epistemologies from the South, and works and research that have been produced in the South. And we could have a sort of first taste of this with the work of colleagues such as Cecilia Osorio, who's here, and Michele Moraes, who's also here, who explored different international cases of conditional cash transfers diffusion process around the world. But I believe that we still have much more work to do together to diversify our research, to combine ideas, concepts, theories, in order to produce innovation on our field. And I hope this conference will be a place to work and open new avenues of knowledge production. So now what we are facing in Brazil, and Professor Esper started to introduce this topic, we are facing a sort of new scenario on a global arena with movements of resistance to globalization and regionalization. We can see the Trump policies in the US, the Brexit, as well as emerging political crises such as in the Brazilian case and other Latin American countries. And we have a big challenge. So questions that we should ask in these days is what happens to policy diffusion and development cooperation when these major contextual or conjuncture forces are operating. And this means that we don't only have new questions, but we have also new intellectual challenges to overcome. In the past conference, we arrived at 6 new frontiers of policy diffusion and development cooperation. And we synthesized these avenues, that's these frontiers, as the following. So the role of private sector on policy diffusion, the internationalization of domestic coalition, resistance to policy diffusion, policy translation, the importance of transnational arenas and the role of the South on policy diffusion. Some of them are still here at the conference, and I believe that we can go deeper with this process. I really believe that we are starting this conference with a new set of frontiers on policy diffusion and development cooperation. And this is quite evident if you see the program, which was kind of a puzzle for us to organize. But we have a plenary problemizing transfer directions. We have panels with topics such as peace and insecurity and policy transfer methods. We have Ideas Café on state capacity and many more. So, as I said, organizing this conference was kind of a labyrinth, and we didn't know what kind of challenges we had to face to arrive here. And it is quite nice because I believe that linear paths might be a bit boring. So it was challenging, but it was very stimulating. And it was not, of course, an easy task to do this. And as I said in the first conference, and I think this could be a sort of mantra that I'll repeat again and again, when we mobilize the most pure energy that comes from our hearts to do our work, nice things happen. And we have so many nice people being together here, and I think this is the key for the success on our tasks. I believe that there are three elements that are in the spirit of this event. The first is really to connect people. I'm still hearing stories that, of colleagues that met in the past conference and that are doing things together now. And this makes me very happy because I think that my work was work for someone else and for building these new connections. And we are also organizing, as a result of this conference, a global platform, a digital platform, to keep this network alive. And this digital network will bring together all the 300 contacts that we gathered through our mailing list of people that were interested on the conference. So connection is the first thing that I think that is really important for us in this conference. The second element is learning. So this is a really massive space for quick learning about everything that's been produced on policy diffusion and development cooperation. So learn with your colleagues and invite them to collaborate in a multicultural, multi-epistemological, multidisciplinary way. Please don't be afraid. It's going to be a nice thing. I can be sure of this. And I really believe that this is a key for innovation, bringing different people to work together with different points of view. And this is the way we can reach the third path to move to the spirit, or to conclude the idea of the spirit of the conference, which is transformation. I really believe that these three ingredients will help us to have another cat leap for the following conference and to boost our knowledge production on policy diffusion and development cooperation research. And just to conclude, apologies for time. I would like to really thank all the conveners who offered their important advices in different moments of the organization of the conference. All the panel organizers, we had at the beginning 11 panels, so these people dedicated their time thinking on themes for the conference, writing proposals, selecting papers, and really mobilizing their networks to be here. I'd like to thank the scientific committee, all the speakers who accepted to be here and share the cutting-edge research with us, and also the funding agencies that supported us. So we received funding for this conference from the National Research Agency, which is CAPES, and we received also funding from the state agency of São Paulo, which is FAPESP, as well as some funding from the Carleton University. We had different partners that also supported us in different ways, and I would like to thank them all. So the French laboratory of the University of Strasbourg, Société Acteurs Gouvernement en Europe, the ZMO Center from Germany, the GIS Participation from France as well, and we received also institutional support from the Brazilian Center of Analysis and Planning, from the Universidade Alberto Hurtado in Chile, the Urban Lab from UCL, Articulação Sul, and the Segov from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul. And last but not least, I have to thank all the organization support. So I've been working for the past year with Roberta, and I really need to thank her for assisting me on organizing this conference. She's not only a brilliant intellectual, but she's one of the best persons I have ever worked with. And for this reason, she's just by our side in the room, still organizing things for the conference. And you will have time to see her presentation of her her research on the PhD session. I also have to thank Camila for joining us on the organization. Last year, she's been really important for us to organize the workshop that will take place in Brasilia next week. And I have to thank also all the students that have volunteered to make this conference more comfortable for everyone. Sometimes in the past weeks, while organizing the conference and talking about my students, of speakers that were coming, and what panel we were organizing and topics that we were going to talk about, I could see something that was very special. I could see their eyes like shining, very anxious and motivated to be here and help here and follow the discussions. And this is very special, and I think that when I see this, I know that my mission has been accomplished. So please, I have one request for you. Please keep our students' eye shining with your research and your talks and everything that you do. Thank you all again. Have a great conference. Drink Brazilian coffee with moderation, and please have fun. You are in Brazil. Thank you very much.